I thought family meant having someone in your corner, but when my own cousin tried to destroy the biggest opportunity of my career, I learned that blood doesn't always run thicker than ambition. What she did next still keeps me awake at night. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The notification sound from my phone cut through the silence of my cramped studio apartment at 6:47 a.m. I'd been awake for hours anyway, staring at the ceiling and running through my presentation for the 100th time. This was it, the contract that would change everything. Meridian Technologies wasn't just any client. They were the tech giant everyone wanted to work with, and somehow my small marketing consultancy had made it to the final round. 3 months of preparation, countless late nights, and every dollar I had left in my savings account had gone into creating the perfect pitch deck. I grabbed my phone and saw a text from my cousin Brooklyn. "Hey Sophia, so excited for your big day. Want to grab coffee before your presentation? I'm in the area and would love to wish you luck in person." Brooklyn and I had grown up together in Portland, Oregon, practically sisters until life pulled us in different directions. She'd landed a position at Mitchell & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious marketing firms, while I'd been scraping by trying to build my own agency from the ground up. Despite our different paths, she'd always been supportive, or so I thought. "That would be amazing," I texted back. "Meet me at Grind Coffee on Morrison Street at 8:30. The morning air was crisp as I walked to the coffee shop, my laptop bag weighing heavy on my shoulder. Inside was everything I'd worked for: demographic analyses, campaign strategies, mock-ups that had taken weeks to perfect. The Meridian presentation was scheduled for 11 a.m. at their downtown headquarters, and I'd planned every minute leading up to it. Brooklyn was already there when I arrived, her perfectly styled auburn hair catching the morning light streaming through the windows. She worked in high-end corporate marketing, and it showed: designer blazer, manicured nails, confidence that came from a steady paycheck, and company benefits I could only dream of. "Sophia." She stood and embraced me warmly. "You look nervous. This is so exciting." I settled into the chair across from her, my hands shaking slightly as I ordered my usual: a large coffee, black. I couldn't afford to have my judgment clouded by anything fancy. "I am nervous," I admitted. "This contract could save my business. If I don't land this, I might have to shut down and look for a regular job." Brooklyn's expression shifted to concern. "That's serious? I had no idea things were that tight." I hadn't meant to be so honest, but the stress was getting to me. "The past 8 months have been brutal. I've been living off ramen and hope, basically. But this Meridian project, it's worth 6 figures over 2 years. It would stabilize everything." "What's your angle?" Brooklyn asked, leaning forward with apparent interest. "I mean, they're obviously looking at other agencies too, right?" Something about her tone made me pause, but I was too anxious to analyze it properly. Instead, I found myself opening up about my strategy. "I'm focusing on their younger demographic. Problem: their current marketing skews too corporate, too safe. I've developed this whole campaign around authentic storytelling and micro-influencer partnerships that could completely shift their brand perception." Brooklyn nodded enthusiastically. "That's brilliant. You always were the creative one. Tell me more about the specifics." And I did. Sitting in that coffee shop, I laid out months of research and strategy development. I showed her sample campaigns, explained my pricing structure, even mentioned the 3 key executives I'd be presenting to: Marcus Chen, the CMO, Rebecca Walsh, the Director of Brand Strategy, and James Rodriguez, the VP of Digital Marketing. "You've really done your homework," Brooklyn said, checking her watch. "I should let you get going. You'll want time to review everything before the big moment." As we hugged goodbye, she squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this, cuz. I'm rooting for you." Walking to Meridian's sleek glass building, I felt a mixture of gratitude and determination. Having Brooklyn's support meant more than she knew. Family believing in you when everything else felt uncertain. That was worth its weight in gold. The Meridian lobby was all polished marble and modern art, the kind of space that made you feel either inspired or intimidated depending on your confidence level. I checked in with the receptionist, a professionally pleasant woman who directed me to the 23rd floor. In the elevator, I ran through my opening lines one more time. The doors opened to reveal a contemporary office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. This was where decisions worth millions of dollars were made daily. Ms. Chen? A tall man in a navy suit approached. I'm Marcus Chen. We spoke on the phone. I thought family meant having someone in your corner, but when my own cousin tried to destroy the biggest opportunity of my career, I learned that blood doesn't always run thicker than ambition. What she did next still keeps me awake at night. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The notification sound from my phone cut through the silence of my cramped studio apartment at 6:47 a.m. I'd been awake for hours anyway, staring at the ceiling and running through my presentation for the 100th time. This was it, the contract that would change everything. Meridian Technologies wasn't just any client. They were the tech giant everyone wanted to work with. And somehow, my small marketing consultancy had made it to the final round. 3 months of preparation, countless late nights, and every dollar I had left in my savings account had gone into creating the perfect pitch deck. I grabbed my phone and saw a text from my cousin Brooklyn. Hey, Sophia, so excited for your big day. Want to grab coffee before your presentation? I'm in the area and would love to wish you luck in person. Brooklyn and I had grown up together in Portland, Oregon, practically sisters until life pulled us in different directions. She'd landed a position at Mitchell & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious marketing firms, while I'd been scraping by trying to build my own agency from the ground up. Despite our different paths, she'd always been supportive. Or, so I thought. That would be amazing, I texted back. Meet me at Grind Coffee on Morrison Street at 8:30. The morning air was crisp as I walked to the coffee shop, my laptop bag weighing heavy on my shoulder. Inside was everything I'd worked for: demographic analyses, campaign strategies, mock-ups that had taken weeks to perfect. The Meridian. Presentation was scheduled for 11 a.m. at their downtown headquarters, and I'd planned every minute leading up to it. Brooklyn was already there when I arrived, her perfectly styled auburn hair catching the morning light streaming through the windows. She worked in high-end corporate marketing, and it showed: designer blazer, manicured nails, confidence that came from a steady paycheck and company benefits I could only dream of. Sophia! She stood and embraced me warmly. You look nervous. This is so exciting. I settled into the chair across from her, my hands shaking slightly as I ordered my usual, a large coffee, black. I couldn't afford to have my judgment clouded by anything fancy. I am nervous, I admitted. This contract could save my business. If I don't land this, I might have to shut down and look for a regular job. Brooklyn's expression shifted to concern. That serious? I had no idea things were that tight. I hadn't meant to be so honest, but the stress was getting to me. The past 8 months have been brutal. I've been living off ramen and hope, basically. But this Meridian project, it's worth 6 figures over 2 years. It would stabilize everything. What's your angle? Brooklyn asked, leaning forward with apparent interest. I mean, they're obviously looking at other agencies too, right? Something about her tone made me pause, but I was too anxious to analyze it properly. Instead, I found myself opening up about my strategy. I'm focusing on their younger demographic. Problem: their current marketing skews too corporate, too safe. I've developed this whole campaign around authentic storytelling and micro-influencer partnerships that could completely shift their brand perception. Brooklyn nodded enthusiastically. That's brilliant! You always were the creative one. Tell me more about the specifics. And I did. Sitting in that coffee shop, I laid out months of research and strategy development. I showed her sample campaigns, explained my pricing structure, even mentioned the 3 key executives I'd be presenting to: Marcus Chen, the CMO, Rebecca Walsh, the Director of Brand Strategy, and James Rodriguez, the VP of Digital Marketing. "You've really done your homework," Brooklyn said, checking her watch. "I should let you get going. You'll want time to review everything before the big moment." As we hugged goodbye, she squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this, cuz. I'm rooting for you." Walking to Meridian's sleek glass building, I felt a mixture of gratitude and determination. Having Brooklyn's support meant more than she knew. Family believing in you when everything else felt uncertain, that was worth its weight in gold. The Meridian lobby was all polished marble and modern art, the kind of space that made you feel either inspired or intimidated depending on your confidence level. I checked in with the receptionist, a professionally pleasant woman who directed me to the 23rd floor. In the elevator, I ran through my opening lines one more time. The doors opened to reveal a contemporary office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. This was where decisions worth millions of dollars were made daily. "Ms. Chen?" A tall man in a navy suit approached. "I'm Marcus Chen. We spoke on the phone. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." Marcus Chen was taking notes now. "And your cost projections for this approach?" This was where I knew I had Brooklyn beat. Her big agency had overhead, account managers, layers of bureaucracy. My operational costs are significantly lower than larger firms. I can offer this level of personalized research and campaign development at roughly 60% of what you'd typically pay, while maintaining higher quality control because I'm personally involved in every aspect. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes. I walked them through timeline projections, showed them how the campaign would scale over 2 years, and demonstrated the tracking metrics I'd use to measure success. Every slide represented hours of work. Every strategy was something I'd genuinely crafted for their specific needs. When I finished, the room was quiet again, but this time it felt different. Less uncomfortable, more thoughtful. "Thank you, Ms. Chen," Rebecca said. "That was comprehensive and well-researched. We'll be in touch after we've completed all our presentations today." I packed up my laptop, shook their hands, and walked to the elevator with as much dignity as I could manage. But once those doors closed and I was alone, reality crashed over me like a wave. Brooklyn had my presentation outline. She knew my key talking points, my target demographics, even the specific influencers I'd identified. With Mitchell and Associates, resources and polished presentation style, she could probably make my ideas look even better than I had. I spent the next 3 hours at a coffee shop across from Meridian's building, alternating between staring at my phone and watching people walk in and out of the lobby. At exactly 2 p.m., I saw Brooklyn's familiar figure striding confidently through the entrance, a leather portfolio under her arm, and the kind of self-assured expression that came from working at an established firm. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Wish me luck." The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually texting me while walking into the building to present my own work against me. I didn't respond. Instead, I ordered another coffee I couldn't afford and tried to figure out what I was going to do next. My savings account had maybe 3 weeks left in it. I'd already turned down 2 potential freelance projects because I'd been so focused on landing Meridian. If this fell through, I'd have to start job hunting immediately. At 3:30 p.m., I saw Brooklyn exit the building. Even from across the street, I could tell the presentation had gone well. She was smiling, checking her phone, walking with the confident stride of someone who'd just knocked it out of the park. My phone rang, Brooklyn's name on the screen. "Sophia, how did your presentation go? I just finished mine and I think it went really well." The executive seemed super engaged. I stared at the phone in disbelief. She was actually calling to gloat, disguised as cousin concern. "It went fine," I managed. "That's great. You know, it's funny. They mentioned they'd had another presentation this morning with similar concepts. Small world, right? I guess great minds think alike." Great minds think alike. She was actually trying to pass this off as coincidence. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Small world. Well, may the best woman win. Either way, I'm proud of us both for making it this far. Want to grab dinner later to celebrate?" I hung up without answering. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of anger, self-doubt, and planning. I couldn't change what Brooklyn had done, but I could control how I responded. I went home to my tiny apartment and did something I'd never done before. I wrote down exactly what had happened, with timestamps and details. If nothing else, I wanted a record. Then I started working on a backup plan. I researched other potential clients, updated my portfolio, and began crafting emails to companies I'd previously considered out of my league. If Meridian was lost, I couldn't afford to waste time feeling sorry for myself. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, but with a Portland area code. "Hello, this is Sophia Chen." "Ms. Chen, this is Rebecca Walsh from Meridian Technologies. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My heart stopped. They were calling with the decision already. It had been less than 4 hours since Brooklyn's presentation. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting with you tomorrow morning. There are some additional aspects of your proposal we'd like to discuss in more detail." I blinked. A follow-up meeting? Not a rejection, not a congratulations you got it call, but a follow-up. "I'm available whenever it works best for your schedule," I said. "Excellent. How about 9 a.m.? And Ms. Chen? Please bring any additional work, samples, or case studies you might have. We're particularly interested in seeing more of your individual research methodology." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen chair, staring at my phone and trying to process what had just happened. A follow-up meeting usually meant they were interested but had questions. Or it meant they wanted to negotiate terms. Or maybe it meant something else entirely. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed Rebecca Walsh's voice on the phone, analyzing every word for hidden meaning. Additional aspects of your proposal could mean anything. Maybe they wanted to negotiate a smaller contract. Maybe they had questions about my ability to deliver without a big team behind me. Or maybe they'd discovered something about Brooklyn's presentation that changed everything. By 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I spent 3 hours putting together a comprehensive portfolio of my past work. Small projects, sure, but each one showcased the personal attention and creative problem-solving that larger agencies couldn't match. I included detailed case studies, client testimonials, and behind-the-scenes documentation of my research processes. The morning was overcast, typical Portland weather that matched my anxious mood. I arrived at Meridian's building 30 minutes early and sat in the lobby, watching employees stream in with their coffee cups and confident expressions. Everyone here seemed to belong in ways I wasn't sure I ever would. At exactly 9 a.m., the same receptionist from yesterday directed me back to the 23rd floor. But instead of the large conference room, I was led to a smaller office with Rebecca Walsh's name on the door. She was alone this time, which immediately felt significant. No Marcus Chen, no James Rodriguez, just Rebecca and 2 cups of coffee. On her desk, "Please sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I hope you don't mind that it's just me this morning. I wanted to have a more informal conversation." I accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm mug to stop them from shaking. "Ms. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you," Rebecca began. "Yesterday's situation was unusual to say the least. We've been in business for 15 years, and we've never had 2 agencies present nearly identical concepts on the same day. My stomach dropped. I understand if that creates complications. She held up a hand. Let me finish. After your presentation, we did some investigation. We called Mitchell and Associates to clarify the timeline of their proposal development. I held my breath. According to their project manager, Brooklyn Mitchell submitted her initial concept outline to their creative team yesterday morning at 10:47 a.m. Your presentation was scheduled for 11 a.m. The implication hung in the air between us. Brooklyn had submitted her original concept less than 2 hours after our coffee meeting and just minutes before my scheduled presentation. That's an extremely tight turnaround for concept development, Rebecca continued. When we asked about her research methodology, particularly regarding the specific influencers she'd identified, Ms. Mitchell was less detailed in her explanations than we'd expected from someone presenting such comprehensive work. I set down my coffee cup carefully, afraid my hands might start shaking visibly. We also noticed some interesting discrepancies, Rebecca went on. Your presentation included several data points that we hadn't shared publicly, demographic breakdowns from our internal studies. When we asked Ms. Mitchell about these same data points during her presentation, she seemed surprised that we had conducted such research. The room felt like it was spinning slightly. They knew. Somehow they'd figured out what Brooklyn had done. I want you to understand something, Rebecca said, her tone becoming warmer. What impressed us most about your presentation wasn't just the strategy, though it was excellent. It was the depth of your personal investment in the work. Every slide, every data point, every creative concept felt like it came from someone who had genuinely wrestled with our challenges and developed original solutions. She opened a folder on her desk and pulled out a printed document. Ms. Mitchell's presentation, by contrast, felt polished but hollow. Beautiful slides, professional delivery. But when we asked probing questions about the thinking behind the strategy, her answers were surface level. She couldn't explain the why behind her choices because she hadn't made those choices, you had. I finally found my voice. What does this mean? It means we're offering you the contract, Rebecca said simply. Full 2-year engagement with the budget parameters you outlined yesterday. We believe you'll bring the kind of authentic creativity and personal attention that this project requires. The words hit me like a physical force. I'd gotten it. Despite everything Brooklyn had done, despite her agency's resources and reputation, I'd actually gotten the contract. There's more, Rebecca continued. We've decided to terminate our relationship with Mitchell and Associates effective immediately. What Ms. Mitchell did violates several clauses in our vendor agreement regarding original work and ethical business practices. I thought about Brooklyn, probably sitting at her polished desk right now, assuming she'd won. The irony was almost overwhelming. I need to ask you something, I said carefully. How did you know to investigate the timeline so thoroughly? Rebecca smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. Marcus Chen has a daughter about your age who's trying to start her own graphic design business. When you mentioned yesterday that this contract could save your company, he recognized the desperation of someone who'd put everything on the line for their dreams. He said that kind of genuine investment doesn't appear overnight in a corporate presentation. She paused, looking out the window at the city below. We get pitched by established agencies constantly. They all have impressive portfolios and smooth presentations, but most of them are essentially selling us the same repackaged strategies they've used for other clients. What you brought us was custom-built for our specific needs, born from genuine research and creative thinking. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back quickly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll start Monday, Rebecca replied. We'd like to move forward immediately. There's a lot of work ahead, and we're excited to see what you can accomplish with proper resources behind you. We spent the next hour going over contract details, timeline expectations, and resource allocation. Meridian would provide me with access to premium analytics tools, a modest budget for freelance support when needed, an office space in their building if I preferred to work on site. As I walked out of the building with a signed contract in my portfolio, my phone started ringing. Immediately. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the caller ID showed Mitchell and Associates. I answered cautiously. Hello? Sophia, this is David Mitchell, Brooklyn's supervisor at Mitchell and Associates. His voice was tense, professional but clearly uncomfortable. I need to speak with you about what happened yesterday. Could we meet for coffee this afternoon? I'm not sure what there is to discuss, I said carefully. Please, there are aspects of this situation that you need to understand. Brooklyn, she's been terminated. The Meridian account was her responsibility, and the way she handled it violated several company policies. Part of me felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by something more complex. Brooklyn was family, even if she'd betrayed me. Her getting fired felt both like justice and like a tragedy. Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not sure what you expect me to. She told us it was a misunderstanding, he interrupted, that you'd collaborated on the presentation and there was confusion about who would be presenting what. But given Meridian's feedback and our own investigation, that story doesn't hold up. I stopped walking. Brooklyn had lied to her own company about what she'd done. The truth is, Ms. Chen, we've been concerned about Brooklyn's work for several months. There have been other incidents, smaller ones, where her research seemed suspiciously thorough for the time she'd been given. We think she may have been taking shortcuts by borrowing from other sources. Other sources. Other people she'd betrayed and stolen from. What I'm calling to ask, David continued, is whether you'd be willing to meet with our HR department. We're conducting a formal investigation, and your account of what happened could be crucial. I looked back at Meridian's building, where I now had an office waiting for me and a contract that would change my life. I'll think about it, I told him. And I'll be in touch. But as I hung up, I realized I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. Brooklyn had made her choices, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. I had more important things to focus on, like building the business I'd always dreamed of having. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office space at Meridian. Technologies, surrounded by whiteboards covered in campaign timelines and strategy notes. The transformation felt surreal, from scraping together rent money to having a dedicated workspace with a view of downtown Portland and access to research tools that would have cost me thousands of dollars monthly. The first phase of the Meridian campaign was already showing promising results. The micro-influencers I'd identified were creating content that felt genuinely authentic, and their audiences were responding with engagement rates 30% higher than industry standards. Marcus Chen had stopped by twice that week just to look at the preliminary metrics, but success came with its own complications. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. Over the past few days, I'd been getting calls from reporters, industry, bloggers, and other marketing professionals who'd somehow heard about what happened with Brooklyn. The story was spreading through Portland's business community faster than I'd expected. This time I answered. Sophia Chen speaking. Ms. Chen, this is Jennifer Walsh from Portland Business Weekly. I'm working on a story about ethics in the local marketing industry, and I understand you were recently involved in a situation involving intellectual property theft? I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking down at the busy street below. I'm not really interested in speaking to the press about that. I understand your hesitation, but there may be other victims. Our investigation has uncovered at least 3 other instances where Brooklyn Mitchell may have appropriated ideas from smaller agencies and freelancers. Your story could help prevent this from happening to others. 3 other instances. The number hit me harder than I'd expected. Brooklyn hadn't just betrayed me, she'd made a pattern of stealing from people who couldn't fight back. What kind of other instances? I found myself asking. A freelance graphic designer who pitched a rebranding concept to a restaurant chain, only to see Mitchell and Associates present nearly identical work 2 weeks later. A a social media consultant who shared campaign ideas during what she thought was a collaborative brainstorming session, a small agency owner who lost a nonprofit contract after his detailed proposal somehow ended up in Brooklyn's presentation. Each example made my stomach turn. These weren't coincidences or gray areas. They were calculated thefts from people just trying to build their careers. The graphic designer, Maria Santos, is considering legal action, but she can't afford the attorney fees. The others have been too intimidated by Mitchell and Associates' reputation to speak up publicly. I thought about my own fear just weeks ago, how powerless I'd felt sitting in that coffee shop watching Brooklyn walk into Meridian with my stolen work. If I were to speak with you, I said carefully, what would that accomplish? Accountability and protection for future victims. When established firms know that theft will be exposed and have consequences, they're less likely to tolerate it from their employees. After hanging up, I sat in my office chair and stared at the campaign materials spread across my desk. Everything I'd achieved felt tainted by the knowledge that Brooklyn had been systematically destroying other people's dreams and careers. My phone rang again. This time it was David Mitchell from Mitchell & Associates. Ms. Chen, thank you for taking my call. I wanted to update you on our internal investigation. I braced myself. We've completed our review, and the findings are extensive. Brooklyn's personnel file now contains evidence of intellectual property violations going back 18 months. We've identified 7 separate instances where she used external ideas without attribution or compensation. 7 instances, even more than the reporter had found. What happens now? I asked. We're reaching out to all the affected parties to offer compensation and public apologies. For some of the smaller cases, we're prepared to offer financial settlements. For larger cases like yours, we'd like to discuss partnership opportunities. Partnership opportunities. I almost laughed at the corporate doublespeak. Mr. Mitchell, with respect, I'm not interested in partnerships with a company that employed someone like Brooklyn for 18 months without noticing a pattern of theft. I understand your position, he said quickly, but I hope you'll reconsider our offer to provide statements for the investigation. Several victims have expressed interest in pursuing legal action, and your case, with Meridian's corroboration, could be crucial for establishing a pattern of behavior. After ending the call, I walked down the hall to Rebecca Walsh's office. She was reviewing campaign metrics on her computer, but looked up when I knocked. How are you settling in? She asked. The early numbers look fantastic, by the way. Thank you. Rebecca, I need to ask you something. If other victims of Brooklyn's theft wanted to use Meridian's investigation as evidence in legal proceedings, would the company be willing to cooperate? She leaned back in her chair. That depends. What are we talking about? I explained what I'd learned from the reporter and David Mitchell's call. Rebecca's expression grew increasingly serious as I described the pattern of theft from small businesses and freelancers. 7 confirmed cases, she repeated. And you think there might be more? I think Brooklyn targeted people who couldn't afford to fight back. People like me 3 weeks ago, desperate enough to share detailed strategies, too small to have. Legal resources if those strategies were stolen. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. What are you thinking of doing? I'm thinking about talking to that reporter. And maybe coordinating with the other victims to make sure Brooklyn faces real consequences, not just job termination and corporate settlements. That's a big decision, Sophia. Once you go public, there's no taking it back. Are you prepared for that level of attention? I thought about Maria Santos, the graphic designer who couldn't afford attorney fees. About the social media consultant who'd been too intimidated to speak up. About how many other small business owners might be sitting in coffee shops right now, unknowingly sharing their ideas with people who would steal them. I think I have to be prepared for it, I said. Rebecca nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. And yes, if you need Meridian's investigation records as evidence, we'll provide them. That evening, I called Jennifer Walsh back. I'll speak with you on the record, I told her. But I want to coordinate with the other victims. This isn't just about my story. It's about stopping a pattern that's been hurting small businesses across the city. That's exactly what we're hoping for, Jennifer said. Maria Santos has already agreed to be interviewed. The social media consultant, Emma Rodriguez, is considering it. If we can get 3 or 4 people to come forward together, it becomes much harder for anyone to dismiss this as isolated incidents. Over the next week, I found myself becoming an unofficial coordinator for what was turning into a significant investigation. Emma Rodriguez decided to go public after learning about the other cases. 2 more victims came forward after hearing about our group through industry networks. The story broke on a Thursday morning with the headline, "Local Marketing Firm Fires Employee After Pattern of Idea Theft from Small Businesses." By noon, it was trending on Portland's business social media, and by evening, it had been picked up by marketing industry publications nationwide. Brooklyn tried calling me that night. I let it go to voicemail. "Sophia, it's me. I know you probably don't want to talk, but I need you to understand that this whole thing is being blown out of proportion. Yes, I made some mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you or anyone else. These reporters are making it sound like I'm some kind of criminal mastermind when really it was just poor judgment. Please call me back. We're family. Poor judgment." That's what she was calling the systematic theft of other people's work and dreams. I deleted the message without responding. 2 months later, I was standing in the same coffee shop where Brooklyn had stolen my ideas, but this time I was meeting with a potential new client, a startup founder who'd read about my work with Meridian and wanted to discuss a campaign for her sustainable fashion company. As I waited for her to arrive, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the article about your success with Meridian. You've come so far since our coffee meeting. Proud of you, cuz. B." I stared at the message for a long moment, then blocked the number and put my phone away. Some bridges once burned weren't worth rebuilding. The startup founder arrived right on time, and as we shook hands and sat down to discuss her vision, I realized something had fundamentally changed in me. I was no longer the desperate freelancer, willing to share everything in hopes of making a connection. I'd learned to protect my work, trust my instincts, and value what I brought to the table. Brooklyn had tried to steal my future, but in the end, she'd only made me stronger. 6 months after the Portland Business Weekly article broke, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my expanded office space when my assistant Maya knocked on the door with an expression I'd learned to recognize. Someone unexpected was asking to see me. "There's a woman here who says she's your cousin," Maya said carefully. "Brooklyn Mitchell? She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insisting it's urgent family business." I hadn't seen or spoken to Brooklyn since the scandal broke. According to industry gossip, she'd moved to Seattle and was working at a small boutique agency under a different name. The legal settlements with her victims had been finalized months ago, and I'd assumed that chapter of my life was permanently closed. "Tell her I'm in meetings all afternoon," I said. Maya nodded and left, but 20 minutes later she was back. "She's still in the lobby. She says she'll wait as long as it takes, and she's crying. It's making the other visitors uncomfortable." I closed my laptop and rubbed my temples. The Meridian campaign had exceeded every performance metric, leading to 3 additional contract renewals and referrals to 2 other major clients. My agency now employed 4 full-time staff members and had a 6-month waiting list for new projects. The last thing I needed was Brooklyn creating a scene in my lobby. "Fine. Conference room B. 5 minutes." Brooklyn looked different when Maya escorted her in. Gone was the polished corporate executive I'd known. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I remained standing, arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes. Sophia, I know you hate me, and I deserve that. But I need you to know that losing you as family has been the worst part of all of this. Worse than losing my job, worse than the lawsuits, worse than having to start over in a new city. You didn't lose me as a family, Brooklyn. You chose to steal from me. You chose to lie to my face. You chose to try to destroy my career for your own advancement. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I know I did those things, and there's no excuse for any of it. But I need you to understand something. I was drowning at Mitchell and Associates. The pressure to bring in new business, to come up with breakthrough ideas constantly, it was crushing me. So you decided to crush other people instead? I didn't think of it like that at the time, she said, tears starting to fall. I told myself I was just getting inspiration, or that ideas couldn't really be owned, or that I was helping small businesses by giving their concepts bigger platforms. The rationalizations were breathtaking in their selfishness. Do you know what happened to Maria Santos? I asked. The graphic designer whose restaurant rebranding you stole? Brooklyn shook her head. She had to take a part-time job at Target to pay her bills while fighting the lawsuit. Emma Rodriguez, the social media consultant? She moved back in with her parents and is considering leaving marketing entirely. These weren't just ideas you took. They were people's livelihoods. I know, Brooklyn whispered. I've tried to reach out to all of them, to apologize. They don't want your apologies. They want their careers back. Brooklyn was sobbing now, her carefully constructed composure completely gone. I've lost everything, Sophia. My job, my reputation, my family. I can't even use my real name in the industry anymore. I'm working as a junior account coordinator in Seattle, making half what I made before, and everyone there will eventually figure out who I am. Part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. She was still my cousin, still someone I'd grown up with. But then I thought about that coffee shop, about how she'd looked me in the eye and pretended to care about my success while planning to steal it. What do you want from me, Brooklyn? Forgiveness, she said immediately. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to know that someday, maybe, we can find a way back to being family. I walked to the window and looked out at the city where I'd built my new life. Portland had become a place of success and growth for me, while it had become a place of consequence and loss for her. You know what the hardest part was? I said without turning around. It wasn't almost losing the Meridian contract. It wasn't the financial stress or even the betrayal. It was realizing that someone I loved and trusted had been watching me struggle for months and saw it as an opportunity rather than something to help with. I wanted to help, Brooklyn said. I just didn't know how without admitting that I was struggling too. So instead, you made my struggles worse. The room fell silent except for Brooklyn's quiet crying. There's something else, she said finally. Something I never told anyone. The reason I was so desperate at Mitchell and Associates. I turned around. I'd been stealing ideas for over 2 years, not 18 months like they found. It started small, a color scheme here, a tagline there. But I got addicted to the praise, to being seen as the creative genius who could solve any problem. When the partners started talking about making me a senior vice president, I panicked because I knew I couldn't maintain that level of innovation on my own. 2 years, she'd been systematically destroying people's careers for 2 entire years. That morning we had coffee, she continued. I hadn't slept in days. The Meridian pitch was supposed to be my big promotion project, and I had nothing. When you started talking about your strategy, it felt like a lifeline. I told myself it was just temporary, that I'd figure out how to make it right later. But you didn't try to make it right. You tried to make it profitable. Brooklyn nodded, fresh tears starting. By the time I realized what I was really doing, to you, to our relationship, to everyone I'd hurt, it was too late. I was already walking into that building to present your work. I sat down across from her for the first time since she'd arrived. Brooklyn, you want forgiveness, but forgiveness isn't something you can ask for like a favor. It's something that has to be earned through changed behavior and making amends. And you can't make amends for this. What if I could? She said quickly. What if there was a way for me to help the people I hurt? How? I've been documenting everything. Every idea I stole, every person I got it from, every campaign that resulted from theft. I have names, dates, financial impacts. There are companies that made millions from stolen concepts, and the original creators never saw a penny. This was new information. Why would you document your own crimes? Because I couldn't live with the guilt anymore, and because I realized that the only way to possibly make this right was to make sure everyone gets proper credit and compensation, even if it destroys what's left of my career completely. She pulled a thick folder from her bag and placed it on the table. This represents 4 years of theft, 63 separate instances involving 41 different creators. Some of them never even knew their ideas were stolen because they were taken during informal consultations or brainstorming sessions that never led anywhere. I stared at the folder without touching it. What are you planning to do with this? Whatever. You think I should do, Brooklyn said. I trust your judgment more than my own at this point. The weight of the folder seemed to fill the room. 41 people whose creative work had been stolen, 63 instances of theft, millions of dollars in profits built on other people's ideas. This isn't about forgiveness anymore, I said finally. This is about justice. Brooklyn nodded. I know, and I'm ready to face whatever consequences come from telling the truth. All of it. As I looked at my cousin, broken, desperate, but finally honest, I realized that this moment would define not just our relationship, but the kind of person I wanted to be in my success. The easy thing would be to send her away and forget. This conversation ever happened. The right thing was infinitely more complicated. We're going to need lawyers, I said, reaching for the folder. Lots of them. For the first time since she'd walked into my office, Brooklyn's expression showed something other than despair. It looked like hope mixed with terror. The face of someone who'd finally decided to stop running from what they'd done. The law offices of Patterson and Associates occupied an entire floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass walls and polished surfaces that reflected the gravity of what we were attempting. 3 months had passed since Brooklyn brought me that folder, and what had started as a simple documentation project had evolved into the largest intellectual property case in Oregon's history. Attorney Sarah Patterson spread Brooklyn's meticulously documented evidence across the conference table. Photographs, emails, financial records, even recordings she'd made of meetings where stolen ideas were presented as original work. 41 plaintiffs, 63 documented instances of theft, estimated damages in excess of $12 million, Sarah said, reviewing her notes. Brooklyn's cooperation has been unprecedented. I've never seen a defendant provide this level of incriminating evidence against themselves. Across the table, Brooklyn looked exhausted but resolved. The past 3 months had been brutal for her. Depositions, interrogations, media scrutiny, and the constant stress of knowing she was dismantling what remained of her professional life. The criminal charges will be filed next week, Sarah continued. Wire fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. Brooklyn, you're looking at potentially 5 to 7 years in federal prison. Brooklyn nodded without flinching. I understand. What about the victims? That's where things get complicated, Sarah said, turning to me. Sophia, your decision to coordinate this class action has created something unique. Most of these creators never would have had the resources to pursue individual cases. By pooling resources and evidence, you've given them a real chance at justice. The past 3 months had transformed my business in ways I'd never expected. Instead of focusing solely on marketing campaigns, I'd found myself becoming an advocate for intellectual property rights in the creative industry. My agency had established a legal defense fund for small businesses, and we'd started offering pro bono consultation for creators who suspected their work had been stolen. There's something else, Sarah said, her expression growing more serious. The investigation has uncovered evidence that Mitchell and Associates leadership knew about Brooklyn's theft pattern at least 6 months before Meridian exposed it. This was news to me. They knew? Email records show that David Mitchell received complaints about suspiciously similar campaigns as early as last January. Instead of investigating, they increased Brooklyn's quotas and pressure to bring in new business. Brooklyn's face went pale. They knew I was stealing and pushed me to do it faster? The evidence suggests they didn't want to look too closely at how you were generating so many successful pitches, as long as the revenue kept flowing. I felt a familiar surge of anger, but this time it wasn't directed at Brooklyn alone. The system that had enabled her theft, rewarded it, and looked the other way when warning signs appeared was just as culpable. What does this mean for the case? I asked. It means Mitchell and Associates is facing criminal charges as a corporate entity. It also means the damages we can recover have just increased substantially. 2 weeks later, I stood in a packed courthouse as the judge read the settlement terms. The gallery was filled with the 41 victims, graphic designers, social media consultants, small agency owners, freelancers who'd spent years building their reputations and expertise, only to have it stolen by someone with more power and resources. Maria Santos sat in the front row, the graphic designer whose restaurant rebranding concept had launched Brooklyn's promotion to senior account executive. Next to her was Emma Rodriguez, the social media consultant who'd nearly left marketing entirely after losing that nonprofit contract. Behind them sat dozens of other creators whose names I'd learned over the past months, each with their own story of theft and betrayal. The court finds Mitchell and Associates guilty of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and racketeering, Judge Harrison announced. The firm is hereby ordered to pay compensatory damages totaling $8.2 million to be distributed among the 41 plaintiffs. A collective exhale filled the courtroom. It wasn't just about the money. It was about validation, about having their creative work officially recognized and valued. Additionally, the judge continued, the court orders the establishment of the Creative Protection Fund, administered by the Plaintiff Coordination Committee, to provide legal resources for future intellectual property theft cases involving small businesses and independent creators. I looked over at Brooklyn, who was sitting with her own attorney at the defendant's table. She was crying, but not from self-pity. When she'd testified the week before, describing in detail how she'd systematically stolen from each victim, she'd looked directly at every person she'd hurt and apologized individually. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was something. Brooklyn Mitchell, Judge Harrison said, you are sentenced to 36 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release, during which you will be prohibited from working in marketing, advertising, or any related creative field. Brooklyn stood and faced the judge. Your Honor, I accept this sentence. I also want to formally apologize to every person I hurt through my actions. I know that my cooperation in this case doesn't excuse what I did, but I hope it helps ensure that what happened to these talented creators never happens to anyone else. After the hearing, I found myself standing outside the courthouse with Maria Santos. The settlement would allow her to restart her design business with proper resources, and she'd already secured 3 new clients based on the publicity from the case. You know what the strangest part is? Maria said, watching Brooklyn, being led away by federal marshals. I actually feel sorry for her. Why? Because she was talented. Really talented. If she'd just been confident enough to trust her own abilities instead of stealing from others, she could have built something amazing. I thought about that as I drove back to my office. Brooklyn's natural creativity and strategic thinking had been evident even in childhood. But somewhere along the way, external pressure and internal insecurity had twisted those gifts into something destructive. My phone rang as I parked. It was Rebecca Walsh from Meridian. Sophia, I just heard about the verdict. Congratulations on seeing this through. Thank you. It feels surreal, honestly. I wanted to let you know that Meridian's board has voted to establish an annual scholarship program for emerging marketing professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. We're calling it the Creative Integrity Scholarship, and we'd like you to help design the selection criteria. 6 months later, I was back in that same coffee shop on Morrison Street, but this time for a very different reason. I was meeting with the first recipient of the Creative Integrity Scholarship, a young woman named Jessica Chen, no relation, who'd been working 3 part-time jobs while building a social media marketing business. I still can't believe this. Is real, Jessica said, clutching the scholarship check that would cover her business expenses for an entire year. When I applied, I never thought I'd actually get selected. Your portfolio was exceptional, I told her. The selection committee was unanimous. As we talked about her plans and goals, I couldn't help but see myself 2 years earlier. Desperate, talented, willing to work harder than anyone else if given the chance. The difference was that Jessica would have support, resources, and a creative community that actively protected its members. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart rate quickened. Brooklyn had been released to a halfway house the month before, and I'd been wondering if she would try to contact me. But it wasn't Brooklyn. It was Maria Santos. Just landed my biggest client ever. A national restaurant chain that saw my work featured in Marketing Weekly's article about the Creative Protection Fund. Thank you for making this possible. I smiled and put my phone away. This was why the fight had been worth it. Not for revenge or even justice, but for the opportunity to create a better system, one where talent was rewarded instead of stolen, where creativity was protected instead of exploited, and where family meant supporting each other's dreams rather than destroying them. As Jessica and I finished our coffee and discussed her first campaign strategy, I realized that Brooklyn had been right about one thing in that tearful confrontation months ago. This whole experience had changed our family dynamic forever, but not in the way she'd feared. Instead of losing family, I'd found something better. A chosen family of creative professionals who lifted each other up, celebrated each other's successes, and protected each other from those who would steal their dreams, and that was worth more than any contract or settlement could ever be. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.